All right, well, welcome back. This particular lecture is going to be on OpenLDAP. And while down there at the bottom it tells you that it's about 30 minutes, it may be a little less. However, the 2-hour practice is every bit of 2 hours. All right. Now, what I tell folks, if you were a Microsoft company, you already have Microsoft's Active Directory. And so the likelihood of you using OpenLDAP is probably not very high. All right. Oracle has the Oracle Internet Directory, OID, which has since been renamed to OUD, the Oracle Universal Directory. And it's not that dissimilar from OpenLDAP or from AD, but it's Oracle's. And Oracle has other forms of authentication as well. I've been an Oracle employee off and on for 22 years. And originally, when I worked for Oracle in the 94 timeframe, I had one user ID, but I had a whole boatload of passwords that I had to remember. So I left education, went out and worked in consulting with a lot of different companies, came back to Oracle. I still had one user ID, but when I came back after 9/11, I only had one password. Had single sign-on. And so there are a dozen and a half applications that I touch real regularly. And I had all of those passwords before. Now I've just got one. That's the promise of OpenLDAP. Single sign-on. Now, LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. And after a fashion, both AD and OID and OUD follow pretty much the LDAP convention. All right? But, and there's always a but, Microsoft's put their own twist on it, like they do on everything they do. And I would suggest that maybe Oracle has done the same. All right? So, if your company is already a Microsoft company and you're using AD, you'll listen to my lecture, hopefully, but not necessarily do you need to do the practice. All right? If you're an Oracle company and you already have single sign-on through OID or OUD, once again, OpenLDAP may not be something that you need to do either. We will turn it on in the practice, you'll configure it, you'll test it, and you'll turn it off. All right? So, we'll have an LDAP server, and you'll sign on from an LDAP client. So we're going to bring up two machines. I think it's host 02 and host 04. All right. There's an LDAP modify, LDAP add, LDAP search, slap password D. All right. Now the main difference between Oracle Linux 6 and Oracle Linux 7 has to do with the standard schemas. In 6, they're pre-configured. Part of the biggest part here in this practice will be for you to configure the standard schemas in 7 because they're not configured. All right, they're just not. Remember I mentioned Perl a little earlier? All right. So the migration tools are Perl scripts. I mean, when you look at your infrastructure, in the etc directory, you have a file called etc hosts. You have a file called etc password, etc group, etc shadow. And so you already have all of this basic information. No, you don't want to enter that again. All right, and so we have migration tools, Perl scripts. And once again, if this was Austin, Texas, you've got 3,000 servers. Do you want to re-add the people from 3,000 servers? I think not. And then lastly, we're going to configure a client machine to use your LDAP server for authentication. So there are OpenLDAP libraries, LDAP clients, LDAP servers, NSS PAM LDAP D. And so we'll change some of the scripts to help you enforce security with pluggable authentication modules, PAM. Okay? And so you've got this, because you're changing from files, etc password, etc group, etc shadow, to LDAP for your authentication, then we need to make some changes using PAM to some of your login scripts and to the password script. Because instead of authenticating with the PASSD command, you're going to have a SLAP password or an LDAP PASSWD command to do that with. LDAP has been migrated so that it works well under systemd. So once you get it installed, you'll enable slapd. You'll then do a start for slapd. And so the acronym SLAP has to do with standalone LDAP server. That's what SLAP is all about. Okay? And so obviously slapd is a daemon. So there is an etc OpenLDAP slapd.conf. That was Oracle Linux 6. That's better. That's better. All right. The current configuration uses a configuration database that is in etc OpenLDAP slapd.d directory. Configuration database. The directory containing additional configuration files are etc OpenLDAP slapd.cn equals config. CN is an acronym, conical name, but that's a directory now. The directory containing the schemas is etc OpenLDAP schema, and then just like Oracle Linux 6, the actual directory containing the database is var lib LDAP. All right, that piece of it didn't change. Everything else changed. So, if we take away SLAP, S-L-A-P, standalone, all right, LDAP server, there's something that checks access control list, ACLs. There's a SLAP add, there's a SLAP auth, cat, DN for distinguished name. Index re-indexes the directory for performance, rebalances that index tree. SLAP password, password utility. SLAP schema checks compliance of a directory, and then SLAP test allows you to take a look at your configuration file and see, did you make a typo? Now, these are server utilities. This is where your LDAP directory is located. Then on the client, there's an LDAP add, modify, compare, delete. All right, to add, because, if I am on one of my 3,000 servers, which is not, I guess that's $29.99 servers, where I'm not running the LDAP directory, then I need to be able to add new users as appropriate. There is extended operation EXOP, XOP. There's a mod RDN. Now, on the previous page, I translated the DN into distinguished name. The RDN is a relative distinguished name. LDAP password is a utility for LDAP users, while the server password is for the server password configuration files. Typically, the user is root. All right. There's a search, which returns an LDIF, LDIF format. All right. There's a URL, a formatting tool, and then because you are no longer authenticating with files, there's an LDAP who am I command. A little bit about that LDAP who am I command, just a bit. As you know through the practices, when you authenticate and we sign on to a new machine, I have you do a who am I, semicolon, PWD, semicolon, hostname. That way I can confirm who I am. I can confirm where I am in the hierarchy of the directory system. And lastly, I can assure that I'm on the correct host. All right, and I've been running those commands in each and every practice for you. All right. And so as we move out to newer technologies, things that were not in the original Linux, that are even in the original Solaris System 5 version 4, like who am I, then we may have to prefix the command with the environment that we're working in. You'll use BTRFS. And so if you've used a df-h command, the df-h command is unfamiliar with the BTRFS metadata. So I need to do a BTRFS file system df-h. You're going to find a lot of this. All right, it's just not with LDAP. So we have a yum command here. I would modify it slightly. Yum-y install OpenLDAP servers, OpenLDAP clients, and migration tools. All right. You'll then enable and start the slapd process. That was on a previous slide. And this creates a database in the var-lib LDAP directory, and you're going to build the schemas for that. That's why this next practice is a 2-hour practice. And you'll update the files in the configuration directory, which is etc OpenLDAP slapd.d directory, cn equals config, subdirectory. And we mentioned the LDAP modify and the LDAP add commands before. And if you get into real serious trouble, sometimes I'll even give you an LDAP delete command. Not in the book, but sometimes essential in the lab. Okay. So here's an LDAP modify. Now, what we have used is something common to Unix called here document, H-E-R-E, here documents. And so you'll use the 2 double chevrons to start with, and then whatever string you follow with. The string typically could be end of file, EOF, or I've also seen EOL, end of line. All right, I guess that could be a Tron reference. All right, if you've seen the movie, you'll understand that. And so you'll have multiple new line indicators, and you'll continue to get new line indicators until you type in whatever you used on the opening line. All right. And so here, DN : distinguished name, database config, type change, replace the old suffix with DC, domain component example, and domain component com. All right. And so whatever the default is from what was delivered, our environment for our labs here is example.com. Okay. And so if you are curious, you can go look up here documents. Once again, HERE, here documents, and it'll explain to you how this developed. And once again, I really do think it came from Ken Thompson and Company. I don't think it was a Berkeley edition, but that was back in the 80s. I've slept once at least since then. All right, and so my memory may be a little foggy. Okay. And you'll have a series of LDAP modify commands that you'll use. You'll take the SLAP password. You'll type in the password that we give you. I think it's Oracle. And it will produce a hash. And so secure hashing algorithm, SSHA. And we'll have you copy and paste that into a file for root's password. And once again, you'll do another LDAP modify command. And so subsequent modifications, like this LDAP add command for the base LDIF file, which describes your directory, requires a password. You don't want anybody making changes to your LDIP database that don't know the password. That could be dangerous. Loading the standard schemas. And once again, this is one of the things that is different. Certainly in Oracle Linux 6, the default schemas were already loaded for you. The schema must be loaded in the configuration database before the object can be defined. And so those are additional steps that make the LDAP in Oracle Linux 7 longer to configure. All right. The schemas are provided in the etc OpenLDAP schema directory. There is a core schema, a cosign, a inter-org person, okay, and a NIS. Now, word about NIS. The precursor to LDAP was Yellow Pages. The common real name for Yellow Pages is NIS. All right. And so if you were NIS and management has now decided to move to LDAP, you could have hundreds, thousands of people in your single sign-on NIS files. And no, you don't want to enter those again. Yes, you want to move them from NIS over to LDAP. And so here is the LDAP add for the core LDIF file, all right, to allow it to get generated. Let me escape this. I really do like the entry that's in the very first part of the notes pages. they've gone out and they've given us an LS on etc OpenLDAP schema. And even though there are some ellipses here, there's a collective LDIF, cosine, Java, OpenLDIF, collective schema, dual conf LDIP, Java schema, PMI LDIP. And so there are more things obviously in that directory. And once again, in the lab, if you happen to think of it, then you might want to run this list command. I don't recall that it's one of the commands that we run in the practice. So, populating the LDIF directory, or the OpenLDAP directory, I need a distinguished name. And so, domain component example, domain component com. Then there is an organizational unit, OU, people, organizational unit group with inside these two domain components. All right? And so they're all part of this base LDIP file. You don't have to type that particular file. It's available for either SCP or FTP to copy it from Dome 0 over to, I believe it is host 02. Migration tools. Once again, Perl scripts, all right? And I've always said that we need to have familiarity with Perl. I'm smiling. I probably shouldn't be. When I was working for the DoD organization, I noticed that on my Solaris box that they had an outdated Perl library. And so I went to the SA and asked him to update the library, which you could do easily. And of course, he baited me. He said, sure, you'll write a test script to test it, won't you? And what was I going to say? No. And so I said yes, and very quickly worked out Hello World in Perl so that I could test his install. It won't hurt you to know a little bit about Perl. All right? Now, as you look at the last box, we take grep and we grep for users in the 1,000 to 1,009 range. Your range may be greater than that, okay? And so inside those square brackets, those are what, from a regular expression standpoint, would be referred to as a character class. So every square bracket is only a single character position. And so in our environments here, we don't have a lot of users. That may not be your case back home. And we start with etc password, we put it into password. We start with etc group, put it into group. All right. And then that gives us commands to help us get migrated over into LDAP. So the migrate password PL command will take that password file you created and put it into LDIF add format and add those users to your LDIF database. We have a group file here, and so I can tell you that there's a migrate group, bottom box. All right. And then with the group LDIP and the user LDIP, you can go out and actually add those to your environment. Step 2, if you will, with an LDIP add command. Now, Linux has come with an authentication configuration. All right. And we can configure LDAP, we can configure NIS. You can even go through and configure WinBind. If you were already using AD, you may not want to go to the extra effort to configure a whole new directory. Once again, in talking to the director at the DoD site, we were looking at single sign-on. And certainly at that point in time, we had OID, Oracle Internet Directory. And he said, well, Al, what are you going to stand up? Well, we're going to show you OID. However, you've got a lot of folks, and every new person on base gets put in AD. All right? My time as a DBA tells me that anytime I have data in two places, at some times that data is going to be out of sync. I don't know that I would use OID. I think I'd probably go with AD. And so I could use WinBind to allow me to do AD. All right. You'll need some additional pieces on the database, the Oracle Advanced Security option to make that happen. But while Oracle would much like you to use Oracle tools, they realize that if you are a Microsoft Exchange customer and you've got thousands of employees, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, then why have them in two places? Okay. So here we can pick LDAP. We do the domain component, for example.com. We identify our LDAP server. We want to use TLS to encrypt the connections. We do need a certificate authority that we can download the certificate from. And then the bottom box on this screen says, how do you want to authenticate? Now, we've picked LDAP passwords. There's a choice here. You can actually pick Kerberos. All right. You'll need to stand up a Kerberos server. All right, that's another step in the process. But you may already be using Kerberos. And if so, that is a very well-respected password management tool. All right, but it's your choice. You can do LDAP passwords or you can do Kerberos. And for those of you that are familiar with mythology, it's K, Kerberos, not C, Cerberus. All right? Cerberus is the three-headed dog that guards the gates to Hades. All right? Kerberos is for password management. Once we get through with configuring the server, you need to move to all of your OpenLDAP client. That would be all of your machines. So I configure one server in Austin, and then on 2,999 client machines, I will do the yum-y install OpenLDAP clients, as well as the NSS PAM LDAP-D packages. In the etc OpenLDAP, LDAP.conf file, you'll configure your two domain components, example and com. You'll enter the URI for your LDAP server, and here you'll hard code the IP address. That way there is no DNS activity, go look it up. You don't want to spend that additional overhead to go fetch that IP address. Now, when this material was written at the end of 2015 and finally published at the beginning of 2016, the etc nslcd.conf file was still being used. I would suggest here today, a couple of years later, you really want to be using SSD as your back-end process. All right. And so SSD is another security tool that helps offload some of the back-end, particularly with NIS or OpenLDAP. And it's a newer replacement for NSLCD. All right. You'll then, inside etc sysconfig authconfig, use LDAP will be yes. You'll enable PAM LDAP module. And so anytime you make a change with a command line tool called authconfig, then systemauth-ac, authconfig, is automatically updated. All right, and so PAM, pluggable authentication modules, becomes aware that you're no longer using passwords locally, but you're actually using the lightweight directory access protocol for authentication. And then lastly, where password, shadow, and group had been a file, designation in etc nsswitch.conf, you're going to want to change that to be LDAP. And then you're going to want to start the SSD service. Now, here in the labs, we still have the NSLCD. But at work, you want to go out and take a look at SSD. So we have a quiz here. Which one of the following statements are true regarding OpenLDAP implementation in Oracle Linux 7? OpenLDAP now uses a configuration database instead of a configuration file, which you have to build. Use the LDAP modify command to make changes to that configuration database. Then the schemas must be loaded in the configuration database before the object can be defined that they used. Well, we covered all of that in lecture. So I think the best answer here is letter D. Letter D. All right, the practice, you're going to configure an LDAP server, you're going to implement OpenLDAP authentication, and you're going to configure an LDAP client. Two pieces of very intricate work. 2 hours worth of work. But if you honestly inside your organization don't think you'll ever use LDAP, then you can certainly listen to my 3-hour discussion on how to do this configuration, and that may be all you'll need. Let's go do a practice.
Now we're going to do the practices for Lesson 10, OpenLDAP. In these practices we will configure an OpenLDAP server and enable LDAP authentication, and we'll configure an OpenLDAP client and log in as an LDAP user. In practice 10.1, we'll configure the server. So we'll configure the slapd.d config database. We'll configure the base domain and test the LDAP server. We'll migrate users and groups into the LDAP directory, and we'll modify firewalld to allow access from LDAP clients. This assumes that we are the root user on host 02 and that we have connected to host 02 by using VNC Viewer and not SSH. And you can see here we have connected by using VNC Viewer. We are on host 02 and we are the root user. If necessary, step 1, connect to host 02. We already are, so we'll go down here to step 2. And this says copy the default dbconfig template file. Use the ls command to view the contents of this directory note that the directory is empty. So we'll look at ls minus var, minus ls/var/lib/ldap. And it is an empty directory. Now we're going to use the ls command to view the contents of the user share OpenLDAP servers directory. And we'll see that there is a db-config template file in there that we can use. And so I'm going to do an ls/user/share/OpenLDAP servers. And you'll see that there's a db-config.example file here. And now we can copy that from this user share directory out into var/lib/ldap directory. And we'll rename it. We'll drop the .example extension. So we want to copy db from here into var/lib/ldap, and we want to call it db_config. We're going to drop the extension. Okay, now if we do an ls-l of that directory, we see that it's out here. Now we're going to change. We see that root owns this file, so we're going to use the chown-r command to change both the owner and a group. We're going to use -r for recursive. So we're going to chown-r ldap.ldap on that directory. And I think we need to use a capital R. And there's the command that we've entered, and it looks good, so we'll run that. We'll do an ls-l again. We see now that the file is owned by owned by LDAP and is in the LDAP group as well. We'll go down here to step 3, and this says to start the slapd service, and we'll use the systemctl command to enable and then to start it. So it's enabled, and now we'll start it. And now we do an ls of this directory, and we'll see that the initial database exists. So I'll just use my up arrow to recall that command. And now there's a bunch of files out here in this directory, just by starting that service. That's 3B. Step 4 is to view the etc OpenLDAP directory. So we're going to cd into there and use an ls-l command. And we're going to show that there is no slapd.com file in this version of LDAP. There was a slapd.com file in the previous version. But instead, there's now a configuration database, which is located in this slapd directory. So let's cd to etc open and ls-l, and we see that there's a slapd directory now. Okay, and all the other files are listed there. We're going to cd into that directory and look at the contents of that. We see there's a couple files in there. One of those is a directory. So we're going to cd into that directory. And we have our database files in here. The contents of the configuration directory. So now we need to update the OpenLDAP config database domain component. The default domain is dc equals my-domain, dc equals com. So we want to change all occurrences of that to this. So this is the way it is right now. This is what we want to change it to. So we're going to use grep and search for this string in all these files And we'll see that these files here do contain occurrences of my domain. So if I do grep and all these files, we'll see that the database monitor file has an occurrence of that. And then also the database HDB file also actually has two occurrences, one for the suffix and one for the root DN. So we need to change all those. So first thing we're going to do in step 6, update the database suffix. So if we look at this, we're going to use the cat command and view this file, and it says right at the very top, do not edit by hand. You're supposed to use LDAP modify. So let's have a look at that. And you see I ran that command there, and at the very top it says do not edit, use LDAP modify. So that's what we need to do. And there are two parameters in here that contain DC equals my domain, and we want to change that to example. There's the root DN and the suffix. So let's make a backup of it first. That's this 6B is to use the copy command and just make a backup of it. So we'll and we could call it anything, but the step actually says to use HDB_BAK, HDB_BAK. So we've made a backup of that. We can always go back to if we mess this up. And now this is a lot of information here before the command. So we're going to use LDAP to modify this. The -Q option, you'll see that we're going to use a -Q option. The -Q options means enable SASL quiet mode. Okay, SASL stands for Simple Authentication and Security Layer. It's a framework for authentication and data security and internet protocols. It decouples authentication mechanisms, etc. The -Y external option we're going to use specifies the SASL mechanism to be used for authentication. External means authentication is implicit in the context. And then we're also going to use the -H LD API // option. This specifies URIs referring to the LDAP servers. LD API allows LDAP connections to run over IPC connections, meaning LDAP operations can run over Unix sockets. After issuing the LDAP modify command, the prompt changes to just a greater than symbol. Enter the entries in bold as shown, so that we're going to go ahead and do this. So it's LDAP modify, and then it's -Q, and then capital Q minus capital Y external, minus capital Q minus capital Y external, and then -H LD API, and it's :// two less than symbols and EOF in all caps. Hit enter, and we've got our prompt. So we want to type in just what it says right here: DN : OLC database equals HDB, CN equals config. That looks right. Double check here. We don't want to make a mistake. Hit enter. Change type, :modify. That looks right. Replace, :OLC suffix. Make sure that's right. OLC suffix, hit enter. OLC suffix, now this is what we're changing it to. Is DC equals example, DC equals com. Make sure we got that right. Looks good. And then it says press the enter key after it says we want to put a blank line in here, and then we're going to do EOF and press enter. So blank line, EOF, and it saved it. All right. Now we're going to want to do the same thing and change the root DN. So it's LDP modify, and it was -Q, -Y, -H, LD API, colon, EOF. Make sure that's right. Okay, looks good. Hit enter. And we've got information right here that we can refer to. So we want to do that same command, dn colon OLC database equals 2 HDB comma CN equals config. Make sure that's right. Yep. Change type is modify. Okay, replace root OLC root DN. Replace OLC root DN, that's correct. And we want to replace it with CN equals manager, DC equals example, DC equals com. Make sure we got that right. Hit enter again, and then EOF. And it modified it. Okay, so this terminates the LDAP modify command and displays the following, which it did. Now we can use the diff command to view the differences. So we'll say diff and that's the one we made the modifications to. And here's our backup. And it says that we should have a new suffix. It should say DC example, and a new root DN. It should say DC example. And so we have, there's the original, there's the new, there's the original, and there's the new. And we can ignore all this other information. It says ignore the other differences such as entry CSN, modifier's name, and modified timestamp. These are the two pieces of information that we were concerned with. OL suffix, we wanted to change my domain to example, and then OL root DN, we wanted to change my domain to example. And that looks good. Okay. Now we can run this grep command again and search for my domain. And now it's in this file, of course, and it's in the backup file, of course, but it's also in this database 1 monitor. So we need to change it here. All right. So if we look at that, we're going to use the cat command and view that file. And again, it'll tell you, do not edit, use LDAP modify. Do not edit, use LDAP modify. So we have to use LDAP modify. So let's make a backup of it first. And the practice, we could use anything, but the practice says to call it monitor underscore BAK. If we mess it up, we can restore from our backup and start all over. So we run this LDAP modify command again. And it was a -Q, and then a -Y external. Then a -H, -Q, -Y external, -H, LD API, colon, 1, 2, 3. I think that's it. Okay, this is the command we're running right now. Make sure we got it right. -Q, -Y external, -H, LD API. Okay, that looks good. So we'll hit enter. And now we want to dn colon OLC. And this is equal 1 in brackets. Monitor, comma, cn equals config. Make sure we got that right. That looks good. Then our change type is modify. And that looks good. Replace. OLC access, that looks good. OLC. Okay, this is a long one. Colon. Let's go slow on this. Bracket, 0 bracket, 2, star, by dn.base equals quote GID number equals 0 plus UID number UID number equals 0, comma, CN equal peer, CRED, peer, CRED, then comma, CN equals external, comma, CN equal external, comma, CN equal AUTH, comma, CN equal AUTH, close quote, space, read, by dn.base, equal quote, CN equals manager, comma, DC equals example, comma, DC equals com, close quote, space, read by, asterisk, space, none. Okay, let's make sure we got that right. So OLC access colon space bracket 0 bracket 2 space asterisk space by space dn dot base equals quote GID number equals 0 plus UID number equals 0 plus CN equals peer cred plus CN equals external plus CN equals AUTH quote space read by dn dot base equals quote CN equals manager comma DC equals example comma DC equals com quote space read by asterisk space none. Okay, I believe it's right. And we'll hit enter again and then EOF. And it says modifying, which is good. This terminates the LDAP modify command and we get the following message, which we got. We can use the diff command now and see. So difffol1 with monitor. And this is the big long line we changed. So this was before and this is after. And the only piece of information we really changed was this, but we had to type in that whole big long line. And it looks good to me. Okay. Let's go on down to the next step and use grep again to see if there's any more mine domains. And the only ones there are now are in our backup files. So we've got them all. We've changed them all. Now we need to create an encrypted user password. So we're going to use the slap passwd command to create an encrypted user password. We're going to enter a password of Oracle. Note that the encrypted password is displayed. This is sample only. Yours will be different. So slap password WD, and we're just going to hit enter, and we're going to give it Oracle, and again Oracle again, and here we've got our result, okay, our encrypted password. So now we're going to select this and copy it into a buffer. So I'm going to highlight this. I need to get the whole thing. And then I'll just do edit, copy. All right. Edit, copy. Now I'm going to use LDAP modify to set this root OLC root password directive. And we're adding a new directive to this OLC database equals bracket 2 HDB LDIF file. So we're going to use the LDAP command to do this. So LDAP modify, we're going to use the LDAP modify command again to do this. Minus Q, minus Y external, minus Q, minus Y external, minus H, and it was LD API, colon 23 EOF. That's right, I believe. Minus Q, minus Y external, minus H. Okay. Press enter. DN equals DN colon database, and this is equals 2. We want to add this directive, this password to this file. HDB, comma, CN equal config. Make sure we got that right. And it looks good to me. Change type, :modify. Okay. Now we're going to add a new directive called OLC root PW. OLC root PW. And then we're going to say OLC root PW. And it says, ensure that you include a space after the OLC root PW directive. So we'll do that. Colon and then a space. Now we want to paste that encrypted password from the buffer by selecting Edit, Paste. So we'll do Edit, Paste, and it pasted it in. Okay, it appears as follows. We're going to press the Enter key twice to add a blank line and then EOF. Okay, so we've added a new directive, OLC root PW, and the contents of that, or the value of that, is the encrypted password that we created using the slap, using the slap PASSWD command. Okay, so now we're down here. We just completed this step. And now we want to load step 10, load the standard schemas. The standard schemas are provided as LDIF files, which can be loaded by using the LDIP add command. The standard schema files are located in the etc OpenLDAP schema directory. Use the ls to view the contents of that directory. So we'll do that. ls/etc/OpenLDAP schema. And we'll see all these LDAP files and schema files out here in this directory. Okay. And now we're going to use the LDAP add command to load the following schemas: core, cosine, inet, org person, and NIS. These four schemas define the basic objects and attributes needed to describe a typical organization. Use the -f file name option for each schema. Okay, so we're going to do LDAP add -q -y external. -h, cancel that, sorry. -h LD API. ://:// Now we're going to use the -f option. And we're going to load these four: the core, the cosine, the inet org person, and the NIS. We're going to do these one at a time. We'll start with core. Okay. And then we're just going to do an up arrow and do the cosine, I believe, is the next one. Okay. And then we're going to do the inet org person. Okay. And then we're going to do the NIS. And those four have been added. Now we're going to add users and groups to host 02. This step populates the etc password and the group files that are used later in this practice. Use the user add command to add these users. So user add -c Oracle student. Oracle student 1, I guess. Student 1 is the user ID, and we're going to add the next one with a few more options. minus U 1005 minus C Oracle 2, Oracle student 2. And we're going to use a different shell. And the student's name is student 2. Okay. We're going to add student 3. With a shell, different shell. Minus S bin SH, okay. And then we're just going to say new user. New user. So we've added 4 new users. And we're going to give a password. We're going to use the password WD command to create a password for the student 1 user and ignore the bad password warning. So PASS student 1, and our password is just going to be password. Type it in again. All authentication tokens updated successfully. Now we're going to use the group add to add the students group. It's students. And now we're going to use the tail. Use the tail command and look at the end of this file and obtain the GID for the students group. And it is 1008, which was suggested as would be the result in the practice. So now we're going to use the user mod command and add the Oracle, the student 1, and the student 2 users to this student group. So it's user mod minus little a capital G, and the group number is 1008, and we want to do that for Oracle. We want to do that for student 1, student 2, and we'll look at the end of it again. And now we see that each of these users are members of that group. So now we want to configure the base domain and test. So we're going to cd into etc OpenLDAP. And use the VI editor to create the base LDIF file as follows. Now we could create this by hand using VI, but it says here there's a sample. This sample file exists on DOM0 in this directory. And you can create the base as follows using VI, or you can use SFTP or SCP to copy it. So we're actually just going to copy that file from DOM0. So it's SCP and it's DOM0, and it's in the OVS underscore seed pool. Seed pool directory /sfws, and the name of the file is base LDIF, base.ldif. We're going to copy that file into our local directory, or into this OpenLDAP, this etc OpenLDAP directory, and we're just going to call it base. We're going to call it the same name. It's going to ask us to authenticate and provide the password, the root password on DOM0, and it copied it. So now it's here, all right? So that just saved us a few steps. So this file here is right here. Okay. Let's make sure it's the same. So DN is DC example, example, object class, OU people, object class, OU group. Okay, so that's our base LDIF file. And now we're going to use LDAP add to add the base information to the LDAP directory. And the -X option uses simple authentication instead of SASL. The -W option prompts for simple authentication. The -D, etc. uses the distinguished name to bind the LDAP directory. The password is Oracle. Okay, so we're going to do L add and -X -W -D and quote CN equals manager, DC equals example, DC equals com, quote -F base, our base file. And it's going to prompt us for the password, which is Oracle, and it added those entries. Okay, and we can do a search just to confirm, to test our server. So we'll run that LDAP search. And the options were -X -B with DC equals example, DC equals com in quotes. And here we go. So we got all of our, we got our people, we got the information from our base LDAP file is now in here. That was the purpose of this LDAP add command. Okay, so that's all in there now. Now we're going to step 13 is update the migrate_common.ph for the correct domain. So use the VI editor to edit this file and turn numbers on, and it's around line 71. So let's use VI and edit this file. It says user, share, migration tools, migrate common.ph. We'll set the numbers on, :set NU, and it says it's around line 71, so we'll go down to 71, and we see down here that the mail domain is set to padl.com, and we want to change that to example.com. All right, we've done that. And then around line 74 is another instance where we need to change. So we go down to 74, and there's another PADL, and we want to change that to example. Right, and I think that's the end. We'll save it. :WQ. Now we need to migrate the users, step 14. So use the grep command to list the users with UID in the 1000 to 1009 range. The purpose of step 12 was to populate this file as shown. Do not be concerned if your entries do not match exactly. So step 12, if you recall, was actually it's step 11, where we added users and groups. And now we're going to add these into our LDAP file. So we come down here and we'll do a grep. And we only want the ones that are in the range 1000 to 1009. And these are the ones we added. Well, Oracle was already in here, but student 1, student 2, 3, and then the new user we added back in previous steps. So we've pulled all those out. Now we're just going to run the same command again, but redirect the output to a file. And we'll just call this file PASSWD. We could call it anything. We're just going to use it in this next command. Now we're going to run the migrate underscore PASSWD.pl command to migrate user information into an LDAP format, redirect the output to users.ldap. So we're going to say /user share migration tools, migrate password, and it's the file that we just created. And we want to redirect the output to users.ldif. This will allow us to add them to the LDAP directory. Putting them in this format allows us to add them to the LDAP directory. So now we can use, now that they're in that format, we can use the LDAP add command to add those. So LDAP add -x minus capital W -d cn equals manager. That's a capital M. Cn equals manager, dc equals example, dc equals com, close quote, -f, and then the name of that file, users.ldif. We give it our password, which was Oracle, and they've been added. Okay, so those users are now in the directory. Now we can search. We can do a search just to verify. And it was -x cn equals manager, dc equals example, dc equals com. Oh, I left out cn equals Oracle student, sorry. -b. Okay, I think that's the right command. OpenLDAP search -x cn equals Oracle student, in quotes, -b, dc equals example, comma, dc equals com, quote. Run that. And we see all of our users in here. There's the Oracle student with the home directory. And that's the one we searched for. So there's all the attributes for the Oracle student. UID is Oracle, class, object class, all the password information, UID, home directory, the geckos, okay? So that student, as well as all these other students that were added up here, are now in the LDAP directory. Now we want to migrate the groups that we created in a previous step. So we'll do the grep command. We'll run that grep command. I'll just up arrow until we find it. And this time we're going to do the group file. And we get all the students in this in the students group. So we'll rerun that command again, but we'll write the output to group. Redirect the output to a file called group. And now we're going to migrate that. We got to run the migrate group command to migrate group information into an LDIF format. So we're going to run this command here. And this is migrate group. And then the name of the file was group, one we just created. We want to redirect the output to a file called group .ldif. All right, now we can use the LDAP command, LDAP add command to add these, to import this group information into the LDAP directory. So it's LDAP add -x minus capital W minus D quote CN equals manager, DC equals example, DC equals com, minus F, file name. Okay, it's going to prompt it for a password. And the groups have now been added as well. We can run the search command just to verify. Let's search for students. Minus X CN equals students, and then minus B DC equals example, comma DC equals com, and whoop, we did something wrong there. Oh, we need a quote here. Okay, there's our students, all right? Our students group, information about our students group and all the members. Okay. Now, I believe the last step in this practice is to trust the LDAP service for firewalld. So we're going to use the firewall-cmd command to permanently permit access to LDAP clients for the public zone. So we'll do firewall cmd -- permanent -- zone equals public. We want to add the service -- add service. The service is LDAP, and success. Now we want to run this command to add the service immediately. So reload. And that is also successful. Now we can list just to verify. All. And here's LDAP. So now the LDAP service is trusted for clients. And that is the end of practice 10.1. So we'll go to practice 10.2, implementing OpenLDAP authentication. In this practice, you use the authentication config tool to implement OpenLDAP authentication. Ensure that you are using VNC Viewer. We are. Ensure that you are the host user on O2. We are. So from host O2, run this system config authentication command. And that brings up this GUI. The GUI appears as follows. Make the following changes. Select LDAP from the user account database drop-down list. So we'll do that first. Okay, it changes a lot of, we have a lot more prompts on here now. Enter DC equals example as the search domain. It already is. Enter LDAP host 02 as the LDAP server. Okay. Check use TLS to encrypt connections. Check that. Select LDAP password as the authentication method. and ensure our screen is configured as follows. So we've got LDAP, user account database, our search base DN is correct, our server is correct, and everything else is correct. Click apply. After a few seconds, the authentication config tool closes. So we'll click apply, and after a few seconds, this window will close, and it did. Okay. So that step was really just to implement LDAP authentication by using the GUI. And we can run this command here to view the authentication settings, auth config -- test. And we can see that all the LDAP information is in here. So there's our server, there's our base DN for PAM and for NSS LDAP. Okay, so we're all good to go there. Now we're on practice 10.3, and we're going to authenticate from an OpenLDAP client. In this practice, you configure the OpenLDAP client on host 04, and then you're going to log in as an OpenLDAP user to test the authentication. Then we're going to disable the authentication. You begin this practice by opening a second terminal window on DOM0 and logging into host 4 as the root user. Okay, so let's minimize this and open another terminal window and become root. And let's make sure host 04 is running. It is not currently running. So we'll cd to /running pool host 04 and we'll start it. Okay. And now it's running. You can see host 04 is running. So log into host 04 from DOM0. Host 04 is not in the host file, so we'll have to use its IP address. So we're in host 04 now when we used SSH. And I just checked that we couldn't use the host name because host 04 is not in here. So we just used its IP address. So we're into host 04. Now from host 04, we're going to try to become student 1. Okay? So I'm going to use su substitute user -student 1. And student 1 does not exist, okay? Which is what we'd hope to see. And the whole point of this lab is to authenticate using LDAP. So we have to set this up on the client side. We've already done the server. We've already enabled this to use LDAP authentication, but now we have to do the client side. And first of all, we tried to become student 1, but it's not set up to authenticate using LDAP yet. So that it came up and said it doesn't exist. And we can grep for student 1 in the etc password file. And of course it's not there on host 04. And now we want to configure OpenLDAP on host 04. So we're going to cd into this directory. And ls-l. See, we have a couple files there. We have a config file. And so now we need to use the VI editor to make the following changes to the ldap.com file. uncomment the lines by removing the pound character and change the IP address to the IP address of host 02. So we're going to vi ldap.conf, and we're going to change base equals this. It's already there. We're just going to uncomment that. And we're going to change the URI to the IP address of host 02. First have to uncomment it, and then we'll just change 192.0.2.102, I believe. 192.0.2.102. That's good. Okay, we'll save that. And then we have to configure the nmcli file on host 04. This is the config file for the naming services, LDAP client daemon. So we'll cd to etc. And we're going to use the VI editor to edit that file. We'll turn numbers on, and around line 18 and 25 is where we're going to make our changes. So we're going to VI nslcd. Turn numbers on, and around line 18 we need to make a change. We want to change 127 to 192.0.2.102. Okay, we made that change. And then around line 25, we need to make a change. We need to, actually this is fine. It says around line 25, view the base setting. You do not need to change it. It's already DC equals example and DC equals com. So we'll save that. And then we're going to configure PAM. So we're going to cd to the PAM directory. And it says to make a copy of this system AUTH file, and so we can use it to restore the original configuration. So I'm going to copy to .bak, make a change, okay. And then use the VI editor to make the following changes. There's a lot of changes here, but there is a file out on DOM0 that we can use. And so rather than make all these edits, I will just copy this file from DOM0 into this directory. So I'm going to scp 192.0.2.1 is DOM0. obs/c pool, and the file name is system-auth, and we're going to put it into the etc PAM directory, and we're going to call it system AUTH. Yes, password, root password on DOM0, and the file's here. So we can look at it. Let's look at it. And we can see all these changes are already there. Saved us some time. So this was a new entry that we had to add, and it's there now. Okay. And in the second section of the file, those beginning with account, we had to add this entry, and it's there now. So these are all LDAP, PAM LDAP entries, all right? PAM LDAP.so entries. And then in the third section, the lines beginning with password, add the following, and that one's there, right? And then in the fourth section, lines beginning with session, we needed to add a couple of lines, this one and then that one's there. And then this one here, Pam_make home directory. So it's going to make a home directory on our client. All right, so we can quit this. All those entries are there. Now we need to configure our NS switch comp file to use LDAP. So we'll cd to etc and vi our switch file. And we want remove SSS and add LDAP to the password, shadow, and group directives as shown. So we'll go down to password. Let's just search for it. Okay, here it is. Here's those 3 directives. And we want to get rid of SSS and change that to LDAP. Okay, we made those 3 changes. Save the file. Configure the AUTH config. So cd to that sysconfig directory. And we're going to use the VI and edit this file and change use LDAP from no to yes. So go down and look for use LDAP. And it's this one here. We want to make that a yes. Okay, save that file. Now we can start this service on host 04. It's nslcd. And now log in as OpenLDAP user from host 04. So we're going to run this grep command again. And it's student 1 is not there. Just verify that it's not there. And there's no home directory for student 1. All right. And now we're going to see if we can search for student 1. So LDAP search -x cn equals Oracle student. -b and it did successfully query the database after all that configuration we did. It was able to find, even though student 1 does not exist, we proved that student 1 does not exist on host 04. We were able, after we did all these configuration steps, we were able to search the LDAP directory on our LDAP server and find the Oracle student. Okay. Actually, we wanted to find student 1, which we did. Okay. Also, the UID is student 1. The first time we ran this, we actually searched for the Oracle student, so they're all in there. All right, that verifies that we are able to query the OpenLDAP directory out on the LDAP server. So now we can try to become student 1. Now that we have LDAP set up and configured, and it worked. We are student 1 now. It actually created a home directory because of that entry we had, the make dir directory. So who am I? If I can spell, I'm student 1. It made a home directory. pwd. I'm still on host 04. Okay. I do an ls-l. You can see the files that are in the home directory, and these files were copied from this directory here, the etc scale file, to populate the home directory by when it was first created. So that verifies that we can in fact log in as an LDAP, as a user using LDAP authentication from one machine when that user doesn't even exist, but it does exist in the database, and it made the home directory on the local machine and allowed us to become that user. Okay, so now we're going to back all this stuff out. We're going to exit to log out, and we're going to stop this service. It's called nmcli. Right. We're going to change our file back to not use LDAP. Change this back to no. We're going to put our NS switch file back the way it was. We want to change all these to SSS. All right, save that file. We want to restore our system auth file, so cd to PAM, and we're going to copy our backup file to the main file. Yes, overwrite it. And now we'll try to log in again, and we can't do it because we disabled all that configuration. Use the exit command to log off host 04. That concludes that practice. Perform the next step on host 02. So we'll go back to host 02. And we want to bring up this GUI again. And we want to revert back to user database as local accounts only. And the screen is configured as shown. Authentication method is password. Click apply. And this GUI will close in a few seconds. And then we can stop slapd and disable it. And this concludes this practice.